afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will begin our session in the afternoon. Okay, so the first one we will have Miss Zhou Huiling from HKU, and her topic is exploring the dynamic interplay between students' motivation, perceptions, and behavior in feedback-seeking processes. Let's welcome her.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for interest in the topic of feedback seeking. My name is Belinda, and Professor David Collins is my supervisor. Today, I'm going to present my thesis, my research. I explored the relationship, the dynamic interplay between students' motivation, perception, and behavior. These are the three components within the feedback seeking process. So today we will go through the concept of feedback seeking and motivation used in my research, as well as the findings and the implications. So what is feedback seeking? We actually seek feedback a lot in our daily life. For example, we may go to a mirror or someone else and ask, how do I look today? But in higher education, feedback seeking means students proactively seek performance-related information from their learning environment. Proactively means it is a student-initiated process rather than passively receiving information from their teachers or from someone else, because students get used to receive information rather than seeking information. And the performance-related information means students may aim to evaluate their performance or to clarify uncertainty or clarify the adequacy of their behaviors. And for learning environment, it covers different aspects, including their teachers, their peers, and ChatGPT, and different tools of Gen AI. So from the concept of feedback seeking, we can see that it is not only just about asking questions, but it covers different aspects. So based on the literature from the context of a workplace, from organization, feedback seeking involves three components: motivation, perception, and behavior. Let's go through them one by one briefly. The first one is motivation. Oh, sorry. The first one is motivation. And for motivation, there are three motives. Some people may view feedback seeking as an instrument, as a tool to gain some useful information for their learning improvement or for their performance improvement. So this is the first one. The second one is ego-based motive, which means students or workers, they pay attention to their ego protection or to their ego defense when they seek feedback. And the next one is image-based motive, which means students or individuals, they may aim to build up their impressions or their self-image in front of someone. For students, they particularly want to build up their image in front of their teachers, because teachers play an important role in their final scores. Yes. And the second is about perception. So in feedback seeking, students may perceive different types of cost or value. When students can sense there's a balance between the cost or value, or when they sense there are more values than cost, then students will take the action of seeking feedback. Usually, typically there are two types of behavior. The first one is monitoring, and the second one is inquiry. So monitoring means observing. So students observe their environment, observe their teachers' behaviors, observe their peers' perceptions. There isn't much interaction between people. And the second one is inquiry. Inquiry means asking directly. So they may approach their teachers, their peers, or approach Gen AI. So among these three components, based on the literature, it argues that the key avenue to understanding feedback seeking strategy is to uncover the underlying motivational dynamics. So in this whole process of feedback seeking, motivation play a fundamental role. However, in the existing literature, there's a limited research about students' feedback seeking, the motivational driving of feedback seeking, particularly in the context of a higher education. There are only some research in the workplace context. So that is my research gap, and that is the importance of my research. So as for the motivation theory, I used theoretical self-determination theory by Ron and Dizzy from 2017. It includes different types of motivation, including intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and amotivation. And extrinsic motivation was further divided into different types of, into 4 types of regulations. So all these types of motivation are arranged on a continuum from autonomy to control. We're not going to explain the details of each type of motivation now, but we will do that in the funding section if any of them is needed. Then we can move on. This is the theoretical framework used in my research. So based on the research gap and the importance of motivation and the importance of feedback seeking. My research objective is I aim to explore the dynamic interplay between students' motivation, perception, and behavior. There are 3 components within the feedback seeking process. So I used a mixed methods research. The first one is a quantitative survey study. In this study, I explore the relationship from feedback seeking motivation. I mean, how motivation influenced their perception and behavior. And the second study is an interview study. I explored how students' feedback-seeking experience will shape their different types of motivation. So this is a mixed methods research. For my data collection and analysis, in the quantitative survey study, I recruited participants from Chinese universities. And finally, I collected 930 validated responses from them. And the data was analyzed by conducting structural equation modeling. And in my qualitative interview study, the participants are from the survey responses who expressed their interest to take part in the following up interview study. So I conducted 29 semi-structured interview with the students, and the data was analyzed by doing qualitative content analysis. So this is the data collection procedure and the analysis procedure. Here we comes to the findings of these 2 studies. And for the first one, my quantitative study has just has recently been published in the Journal of Assessment and Education in Higher Education. So in this study, I primarily constructed a hypothesized model based on the literature. And this model pictured the relationship from different types of motivation to students' cost value perceptions and to their frequency of monitoring and the frequency of inquiry. And then I used my collected data to test this model. I got the result like this one. So we will read this figure through 4 tables. Okay, table 1. Table 1 is about the influence of motivation on students' perceived cost. So I found the 2 types of motivation in this table. The first one is introduction. The second one is amotivation. So please look at the notes here. So what is introduction? This is one type of motivation from SDT. So introduction means ego involvement. Students care about their ego protection or their ego defense. So they focus on their approval or disapproval from themselves or from others. So if students have introduction, which means students may feel good about themselves or feel bad about themselves because of the outside information or the outside event. So let's go back to the context of feedback seeking. If students concern a lot about their egos when they seek feedback, it is easy for them to feel the cost from this activity. And the second one is amotivation. Amotivation means students are demotivated to take part in this activity. So they feel lack of value, they feel non-relevance of this activity to their learning improvement. So they don't, briefly, they don't like this activity of feedback seeking. So when they have a high motivation for feedback seeking, they will perceive a very high perceived cost. So there are 2 types of motivation related to their perceived cost. The second table is about the influence of motivation on their perceived value. I found the 2 types of motivation. The first one is identification. Identification is the most important type of motivation in this activity. It means personal importance. Students consciously value the importance of this activity because they know it is useful for their goal achievement. So then it will be easy to understand. If students have a quite high identification for this activity, then they will, If they have a high level of identification, then they can perceive the value of this activity. And the second one is amotivation. Amotivation playing an opposite role to identification, because they can perceive lack of value of this activity, so they perceive less value from the feedback seeking. And table 3 is about the influence of motivation on students' monitoring frequency. I mean, how much students observe their environment. So we will read some key points. The first one is identification. Again, identification is about the personal importance. They can feel the value of this activity. So when students have identification for feedback seeking, they're more likely to use the approach of monitoring. They tend to observe the world. They tend to observe the world rather than ask questions directly. And the second one is introjection. So when students care about their ego-related issues when seek feedback, they also tend to use the approach of monitoring rather than inquiry. And the third one is not that important, because amotivation does not directly relate to the monitoring frequency, but cost playing a mediating role in the middle. So identification and introjection, or their personal importance or their ego involvement matters a lot in the feedback seeking activity. And table 4 is about the influence of motivation on students' inquiry frequency, asking questions directly. So the first one is intrinsic motivation. What does intrinsic motivation mean? This time, intrinsic motivation does not relate to any outside event. It's about personal interest, enjoyment, and inherent satisfaction. So in this process, students have some inner satisfaction. They feel it is closely related to their own self-growth. They are curious to explore, or they are inspired to do something. So that is intrinsic motivation. So when students have intrinsic motivation to seek feedback, they tend to ask questions. So we can see intrinsic motivation occurs between interpersonal relationship or interpersonal interaction. And the next one is identification, still about the importance of this activity. So identification decrease the use of inquiry. I was surprised when I got this result, and I even tried to do my calculation for multiple times, and even try to change my model, but the result turned out to be the same. And later I found some reasons for this result. The first one, in general, students tend to prefer monitoring than inquiry. So this reason can partially explain why identification decreased the use of inquiry. And the second reason is from my interview data. My interview data show that the hierarchy between teachers and students make students feel reluctant to ask questions from teachers. So hierarchy is one reason. And the next one is the competitiveness among peers also makes students feel reluctant to ask questions from their peers. So these are the reasons for this result. And the next one is introjection, is still about ego-related issues. And introjection increase their use of inquiry, because some students may tend to build up their self-image or their self-impression, particularly in front of their teachers or someone they think is important. And the next one is amotivation. Still, amotivation doesn't have a direct influence on inquiry frequency, and cost playing a mediating role in the middle. So far, I introduced the influence from different types of motivation and to their perceptions and to their behavior. Now let's move on to to the result of the qualitative result of the interview. Let's see what the students said about this activity. The first one is, it is very likely for students to develop an interpersonal relationship with peers because of their similar ages, and because of the similarity in their age and the similarity in their interest. So when they build up a strong relationship among peers, they may develop their mutual understanding. They can feel the joy of this conversation. It helps them to feel a sense of belonging and a sense of relatedness. And this is related to intrinsic motivation. And when students seek feedback from teachers, they may receive teachers' support or they may receive teachers' praise. And teachers' support, teachers' willingness to support them makes students feel relatedness, because it is quite important for students to feel they are cared by their teachers. It's a great encouragement for students to be motivated to learn. And when they receive praise from their teachers, it contribute to their competence and their autonomy. And these three types of psychological needs also relate to intrinsic motivation. And the next one is gaining useful information from teachers, from peers, or from GAI. This one is still the most important. This relates to identification. So in the feedback seeking activity, as long as students feel that they can learn something new, they can expand their knowledge, or it is helpful to solve their problems, they think it is useful. They think it is useful. So this one is the very important type of motivation for students. And the next one is experiencing teacher critical evaluation with limited constructive information. If in this case, students will feel embarrassment, feel disapproval, or feel ego threat, and that is related to introduction. And this category, particularly from teachers, I think Chinese students, they care a lot about their teachers' comments. Teachers' positive comments is a great encouragement for them. But if teacher is critical or quite critical, and there will be a discouragement for them. And the next one is receiving unsatisfactory information from any sources, from teachers, from peers, or from ChatGPT, from DeepSeek, or anyone. They think they feel limited usefulness for learning, and then it causes a motivation. So this is the inquiry-based experiences. The next one is monitoring, when they observe their learning environment. Sometimes students, they may observe and try to learn from their teacher's performance or learn from their peers' behavior. Then it will inspire, particularly when these peers and the teachers have some admirable characteristics or admirable performance. It will inspire the inspire students to learn from them. They are learning, they're observing and learning because of their curiosity. They want to improve themselves. And this is related to their intrinsic motivation and identification as well. And the next one is self-directed information retrieval from existing material. So in students learning, it is very common for them to search online, search offline from library. And in this process, if they can gain some useful information to help them to solve their problem or improve their performance, they still can feel the usefulness. So it is related to identification. And the next one, students reported a lot about reflecting on their positive experiences. They give me a common example about feeling in one examination. Then they will review their preparation process, their preparation procedure. They will know their weakness and the strengths. And in the retake, if they take that exam for the second time, so this reflection will play as a guidance for their future efforts. So this one is also related to identification, the value of this process. And the last one is comparing their own learning outcomes with peers. So this group is different from the first one because the first one is process-driven. Students are observing others' learning strategies and the learning process. Then you can learn from them. But the last group is this group of students are outcome driven. So when they feel they are performed not as good as others, they feel themselves are not competent, they feel embarrassed. That will be related to introduction, will be related to their ego related issues. Yes. So these are the 4 types of monitoring based experiences. So I will give 2 quotations from my interview data. Lillian said, I sent my draft essay to my mentor and he replied quickly with very detailed comments. I can feel my teacher was very supportive and cared about my learning. So I often consult him when I have questions. So in my data, in my context, my participants, they really care about teachers' comments and teachers, whether the teacher care about them or not. And Olivia said, you can ask AI a ton of things and it usually gives you answers. But a problem may arise if you ask something it doesn't know. It might piece together some random answers that are not accurate. I think we have the same experience because we got inaccurate information from ChatGPT or from other AI tools. So by the end, I try to combine to interact the findings from these two studies. Then I got the reciprocal relationship between students' motivation, perception, and behavior. So there's a circle. I found 4 types of motivation in the context of higher education. They play an important role in this activity, and they influence students' perception and again, influence their behavior choices. And in the red part, in the qualitative interview part, their feedback seeking experience with their teachers, peers, or with AI will influence their perceptions and go back to their motivation again. Okay, so let's see the significance. From the theoretical part, I identified 4 types of motivation underlying students' feedback seeking in their higher education learning, and also the reciprocal relationship among these 3 types of component. And also, I think I may argue that human sources are irreplaceable in students' feedback seeking process, because I found humans can facilitate their intrinsic motivation and the introjection, but Gen AI cannot. So human can provide them emotional support or emotional damage, but AI cannot do that. For practical implication, my research suggests the students to develop a human and the Gen AI collaboration in feedback seeking, because in my data I found that sometimes usually students approach Gen AI for some understanding of their problem or for what they are learning. That played a role as a preparation before they approach the teachers. And also after they inquire teacher feedback, sometimes it's difficult for students to understand, or it's difficult for students to achieve the teacher's expectation. And this time, Gen AI play a role as a scaffolding to help students understand the teacher's feedback or help them to achieve the teacher's standard. So I think it is important for students to develop the collaboration between human and Gen AI in their feedback seeking process. And the second one, that is from the students' view. They think it is important to pose good questions to qualified partners in a collaborative way. And to ask good questions requires students to have a good understanding about what they are doing, to have a good understanding about their problems. And qualified partners means those one who are patiently to listen to your problem and who have the expertise to help you solve your problem, and and that provider is a good listener and a good communicator. And a collaborative way makes makes the feedback seeking activity can occur continually, so they can learn from each other. And the third one is we encourage teachers to incorporate the feedback seeking into their curriculum design to facilitate its use as a common and a regular learning practice. We don't want feedback seeking to be something special, particularly in the age of AI. When we are using AI, we begin from a prompt. We begin from asking questions. So it should be a very basic skill in our future learning in the Gen AI age learning. So if students can use feedback seeking as a regular practice of their broader learning process, then they will develop the skill of asking questions and understanding, interpreting the information they gain from their environment, and finally to uptake this information, to apply this information in their own learning. Yes, that's the practical implication. And finally, it's the references used in this research. So it's the Q&A session. Do you have any questions to my research? Thank you. Sure.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have learned a lot about the motivation types. Just out of curiosities, I was wondering, based on your evidence, are there any switch between motivations? I mean, for example, when you were talking about motivation and uptake of feedbacks, I was wondering maybe when learners reading certain type of feedback, their motivation will change to another type, or there's coexisting of two type of motivation. So I was wondering if that's a case, or I would just figure it out.
Yes, yes. Thank you for your question. It's a very interesting one. Based on the self-determination theory, one person, one individual may have different types of motivation. For example, one student, when they seek feedback, they may have identified the regulation, and at the same time they may concern about their egos. So one person may have different types of motivation. That is a personal motivation profile. And the second one, just to go to your question, it's very possible for motivation changes. In the feedback seeking context, one student may begin from like external regulation, but when the students seek feedback and they feel they're really learning something, then it is possible to change from external regulation to identified regulation. So it is the fact. It is a fact, but that is not the real focus of my research. So in the future, it will be very interesting to work on the student motivational profile to go deeper into what type of student, what type of motivation one particular student have, and the influence on their behavior and perception. Yes, yes.
You're saying you're using structure equation model.
Yes.
And just based on your answers, I was wondering, is it possible to use the same structure equation model to calculate the powers of different types of motivation, or it's not really the thing?
I don't think structural equation modeling can calculate the power, because in my understanding, SEM particularly work on the relationship, like from one variable, the relationship between one variable to the second one and to the third one. But if you want to compare the different power of the variables, maybe we do some ANOVA analysis. So we may use different analysis method. Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your brilliant presentation. And I think it's quite mind-blowing to combine the motivation types with the feedback. And one question that I'm just wondering is that, have you observed any evidence of the different types of motivation intersecting with each other in influencing the feedback behaviors?
You mean the interplay between the motivation?
Different motivation types.
Oh, no, I didn't do that in my research, but it sounds interesting. Do you mean like why internal regulation will trigger students identified regulation?
Exactly. Or how
Mm.
are they on on the same continuum? Or in what part, like the percentage of each motivation types influence the feedback behaviors?
I think that will be quite a psychological study, but I didn't work on that in my research.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Or you want to make some comment or give some encouragement to our doctor today? Anyone? No? Okay. Anyway, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next we will invite Mr. Lu Dun. I hope I okay. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. His topic is use of ChatGPT's content-focused feedback in text revision, behavioral, cognitive, and affective engagement. Okay. Do you mind to repeat? Okay. Okay, let's welcome Mr. Wu. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm very glad to be here and to present my study. And so the previous presentation was about feedback seeking, and that is related to my research. And my research is to treat student not as a feedback seeker, but as a feedback receiver. And I'm going to present how students actually process and engage with the feedback they received from ChatGPT, and with one particular dimension, which is the content-focused feedback. So this is my title, and I'm Dunming, and I'm a PhD candidate from Department of English, City-based Hong Kong, and Professor Jacqueline is my former supervisor. So this is the content of today. I will first present the research background, and then the methodology, and then the results and the implications. So the reason for the focus on the particular type of content-focused feedback is that content in writing is very important. And my study focused on argumentative writing, because argumentative writing is the most common genre for university students. So based on the literature, for good argumentative writing, writers should produce good content, considering the following aspects. They need to have a strong claim, supported with acceptable, relevant, sufficient, and detailed evidence. And they should also include counter arguments and rebuttals, and also build up logical reasoning between these elements. However, research also has shown that L2 students have a lot of challenges in producing the good content in argumentative writing. For example, L2 students may not be able to provide reliable and relevant evidence to support their claim, and also they have challenges in making logical reasoning out of the evidence. And some research has shown that L2 students fail to refute their counter arguments effectively. What that means, L2 students may need support to develop their content in order to have, to write a good argumentative essay. And GenAI has potential to provide high quality content focused feedback. And for the first thing, it is very efficient, and it can produce the feedback within seconds. And also it can understand natural language and provide creative responses. And that is to say, it can provide the content-focused feedback in a creative way and flexible way. And the feedback could also be adaptive to the learner's needs, and so that the content-focused feedback is personalized. And also its interactive feature allows learners to iteratively and ask for follow-up feedback if they do not understand, or they do not know what to do when they receive the feedback. But we argue that the mere presence of ChatGPT does not guarantee the positive outcome, and illustrated here. It is about students' engagement with the feedback that actually matters. We argue that it is students' active and critical engagement with the content-focused feedback that we realize the potentials of these GenAI's feedback. So that's the reason why we want to actually explore how students engage with the feedback rather than the quality of the feedback. And in the previous literature, there are some studies exploring student engagement with GenAI feedback. And these studies establish that student engagement is a complex, nonlinear, and dynamic process, with their proficiency levels and their technology competence influencing this process. However, these studies have a very exclusive focus on the linguistic dimension. And as I said before, a good writing does not just require good language, but also the content, especially in argumentative writing. And some studies have explored student engagement with automatic content-focused feedback. And so there are studies that looked at content-focused feedback. And for example, Wang et al. In 2020 investigated how students engage with the feedback provided by eRevise, a AWE system. And the study showed that the majority of students accepted the content-focused feedback. And a recent study by Chen investigated how students engage with ChatGPT produce content-focused feedback, and they identified 3 types of revision operations. Students might accept, argue, or ignore the feedback. And they also identify some barriers for students' uptake, including misrepresentation of author's intention and also the lack of clarity. However, these studies are mainly focused on the behavioral dimension. Okay, so how students react to the feedback behaviorally. And the cognitive dimension, in other words, how students process mentally towards the content-focused feedback is less clear. So based on these research gap, this is our research question. So our research aims to address this research gap. So we want to answer how do undergrad L2 students behaviorally, cognitively, and also affectively engage with ChatGPT's content-focused feedback in an argumentative essay revision task. So to guide our study and analysis, we adopted a 3-dimensional learner engagement with feedback framework, including behavioral engagement and cognitive engagement, affective engagement. So in our study, behavioral engagement includes students' revision operations and their revision strategies and the overall time spent on the revision task. And cognitive engagement includes students noticing and understanding of the received feedback and their cognitive and metacognitive strategies to facilitate their processing. And also affective engagement includes students' emotional reaction to feedback and their overall attitude to the ChatGPT. So this is our methodology. So our study was situated in the EAP course in the EMI University in Southeast China. And we adopted a qualitative design with multiple case study with 6 voluntary participants. So here are the profiles of our participants. As you can see that most of them are with advanced L2 proficiency with only 1 student with intermediate proficiency. And most of them had prior experience with AI-assisted writing. And here is how we collected our data. So first, so the writing task was a multiple draft and essay. So students needed to submit their first draft and received teacher feedback first. And after that, and they produce a first draft, okay, and then they exchange their draft with their peers to receive peer feedback. At the very end of the process, students revise their final draft with ChatGPT's content-focused feedback. So at this stage, we collected our data, and we first arranged a workshop, and after that, we require students to record their revision process and submit their original writing and their revised draft and the interaction logs with ChatGPT. And after that, we organized thematic recall and semi-structured interviews. And in our study, ChatGPT 4.0 model was used because that was the most advanced ChatGPT model at the time of data collection. And I should highlight that we provide a suggested prompt to students to elicit the content-focused feedback. Because we were aware that the suggested prompt might limit students' flexibility in eliciting ChatGPT's content-focused feedback. But we hoped that students actually engage with the content-focused feedback. Otherwise, if we granted flexibility to students, they might ask ChatGPT for other types of feedback, for example, the language feedback. So we provided a suggestive prompt, and actually in our study, all students used this suggestive prompt as their initial prompt, as the first prompt to elicit ChatGPT's content-focused feedback. Okay, and So in terms of how our data were analyzed, so each dimension was analyzed with different data sources. And so the behavioral engagement were analyzed through the screencast and comparison between the original draft and the revised essays. And we also identified 3 types of revision operation, which are accept, reject, and substitute. So accept means the suggestion was implemented without any changes. Reject means student did not implement the suggestion. And substitute means that the suggestion was implemented, but students actually make some modification. And cognitive engagement were analyzed through the stimulated recall and students' prompts. And also affective engagement were analyzed through the semi-structured interviews. And these 2 data sources were analyzed adopting a qualitative approach and through a 3-step coding process. So this is how our data were analyzed, and I'm going to present the results. And because of time limits, I'm going to focus on 2 students, 2 focal cases, and with very different learner profile. So one is Daisy, who had an advanced proficiency level and very extensive prior experience with AI-assisted writing, while Claudia had a intermediate language proficiency level and very limited AI-assisted writing experience. So we are very interested in how these 2 learners with different profiles engage with the content-focused feedback. So let's see Daisy's case. And so in terms of the behavioral dimension, she actually rejected 8 out of 11 of the received feedback. So most of the feedback were rejected. Okay, and she only substituted 1 suggestion regarding the strength of her claim and 2 on logical reasoning. And so that showed that she had a pretty negative behavioral engagement with the ChatGPT content-focused feedback. And she adopted a revision strategy. So she was not satisfied from the content-focused feedback from the initial prompts GenAI produced. So she actually actively seek additional feedback on a self-identified problem, as you can see in this example. So this problem, she thought that one of her sentences was not that logical. So she prompted ChatGPT to provide her with some suggestions. Sorry. So the use of revision strategy suggests that Daisy's behavioral engagement was not at the surface level, only engaging with the existing feedback. Okay, and she actually actively sought additional feedback based on her needs. In terms of the cognitive dimension, her cognitive engagement could be considered as substantial. So she utilized a lot of cognitive strategies. And in this example, one of the strategies we identify is she carefully compared the AI-generated comments with her original writing and decide which one was better. So in this example, you can see that you can see Daisy's comment. She thought that ChatGPT's version of the thesis statement was rather one-sided, while her version was could capture both sides of her argument. So considering that, she rejected ChatGPT's content-focused feedback. Another cognitive strategy was critically evaluate the alignment of her intention. So in this example, you can see that in Daisy's comment, in the conclusion section, actually Daisy wanted to elevate her essay to a higher level and to aim for broader implication. So and she wrote educators rather than focusing on a particular university, and that's her writing intention. However, she recognized that ChatGPT suggestion did not recognize or did not get her writing intention. So ChatGPT provided a piece of feedback that requests her to change the word educators for a more focused context. Okay, and she rejected this feedback as well because this violated her writing intention. And also, like I said, the writing task was multiple draft with different sources of feedback. So actually, Daisy also leveraged external sources of knowledge to evaluate the content-focused feedback from ChatGPT, and including the model text she had read and the teacher feedback. So in receiving ChatGPT's comment on the focus of the argument, she reported that she remembered her teacher did not criticize on this aspect. So she thought it was fine. Okay, and in this regard, she also rejected ChatGPT's feedback. So that means when she evaluated the feedback, she also did not focus only on the ChatGPT feedback, but rely on other sources. In terms of the affective dimension, Daisy had a pretty negative engagement, and her dissatisfaction was very strong. So she reported that ChatGPT did not seem to understand what she wrote, so it was not very useful to improve the content of her essay. And she developed distrust because of his prior experience. So she thought that ChatGPT's response was not 100% reliable, and it could produce untruthful information. So she needed to rely on her evaluation and judgment. And so this is Daisy's case, and we can see that Daisy had the highest cognitive engagement while a low of affective engagement. And turning to another case, and a very different profile case, which is Claudia. And if you remember, Daisy had a really low behavioral engagement, rejecting most of the content-focused feedback, while Claudia substitutes most of the feedback, okay, and that is accepted the feedback, but with her own modification. So she only rejected 3 suggestions and accepted 1 suggestion regarding clarity. And very similar to Daisy, Claudia also requested feedback based on her personal needs. So as you can see in this example, she was not sure how she could write the first paragraph to capture students, to capture readers' interest. So based on her own need, and she requested ChatGPT's feedback in this regard. In terms of cognitive dimension, Claudia had a comparable substantial cognitive engagement with Daisy. So one strategy we identify is she actively tried to understand the ChatGPT content-focused feedback with follow-up prompts to seek elaboration and specification. So as you can see in this example, ChatGPT provided a suggestion on how to develop the counter arguments in her essay. However, after closely looking at processing this piece of feedback, Claudia actually had difficulty understanding what she actually needed to do. So she used a follow-up prompt asking and how she could benefit from the developed counter argument. Okay, so that means when Claudia did not understand the ChatGPT's feedback, she would actually use follow-up prompts to request for clarification. And also there are other cognitive strategies she used. For example, she applied a genre-specific knowledge, as you can see in this example. And so she thought ChatGPT provided a suggestion, including a scenario in the introduction, in the beginning of the introduction, to make the introduction more interesting and engaging. However, Claudia thought that it was an argumentative essay, so it should be more academic. So drawing on her knowledge of the genre, she rejected this suggestion. And also, Claudia analyzed the contextual fit of AI-generated content. So here is her quote. So she reported that she only will use some of the ChatGPT suggestions, but not all. So she needed to analyze where to place the selected content to ensure that her logical flow was was good. And also the words ChatGPT generated did not match her writing style, so she needed to make changes. So that means she did not really accept without changes, but she analyzed the contextual fit with her own modification. In terms of our affective dimension, she had a relatively high engagement, thinking that ChatGPT was useful in giving her fresh ideas and organizing her thoughts. She only had minor dissatisfaction considering the overwhelming and general and vague comments sometimes. So based on these results, and we could draw on some points for discussion. So in line with previous studies, we also identify that learner engagement with ChatGPT content-focused feedback is complex and especially non-linear. Okay, so this could be reflected in Daisy's case with her substantial cognitive engagement but low affective engagement. So a high engagement in one dimension does not necessarily lead to high engagement in another dimension. And we also identify that student engagement with content-focused feedback is an iterative process, and this pattern was less reported in previous studies on student engagement on language-focused feedback. So students engage in the back and forth communication for elaboration, clarification, and specification after their evaluation of the feedback. So here is another example, is another case for Sharon. So when she received one piece of feedback, she did not really understand as well. So she actually used 2 follow-up prompts to seek for clarification before she could make any informed further action. So, and this is the iterative process of the feedback engagement. In terms of the cognitive dimension, we could see that students, rather than relying on their language or the linguistic knowledge, and they relied more on their subject matter knowledge, their genre awareness to evaluate whether the feedback aligned with their writing purposes. So this is very different from the previous studies reporting students rely on their linguistic proficiency. And language proficiency play a central role in processing the feedback. But in our study, students rely on their subject matter knowledge. In terms of affective dimension, we identified that prior experience may shape students' affective engagement with Daisy, a more experienced user with greater skepticism, while less experienced user like Claudia might view the tool as novel and helpful and supportive. And we also identify the engagement patterns of students' content-focused feedback might align with the feedback literacy, some dimension of the feedback literacy framework, including appreciating feedback, making judgments, managing affects, and taking actions. So, and this alignment might suggest a possible relationship between feedback literacy and feedback engagement in a Gen AI context, which has also been suggested by previous scholars. And like I said, some students might complain that ChatGPT content-focused feedback being vague and general, and fail to provide feedback on essential content feedback content features and misaligned with author's intended purpose. However, this should be treated with caution because they use the initial prompt. They use the suggested prompt as the initial prompt. So we argue that a prompt developed students' prompting literacy might address these limitations. So students can actually use the content rubrics as the prompt, and also use effective prompting strategies like proper and clear, suggested by previous literature. So here are the implications based on our discussion. So to foster critical and meaningful engagement with ChatGPT content-focused feedback, teacher might need to develop students' genre knowledge and subject matter, not just their language proficiency, but their content knowledge actually. And also students' AI literacy in terms of the understanding of ChatGPT's affordances and limitations, and the ability to craft effective prompt, especially the follow-up action, the follow-up prompts, because students engage in the iterative process. And also the critical evaluation, considering whether the feedback align with their writing goals, the genre expectations, and also other feedback sources. And also teachers should also guide students how to purposefully incorporate the content-focused feedback into their text. And considering the potential link between students' feedback literacy and feedback engagement, teacher could also develop students' feedback literacy. And here are the references of this study. And so, yeah, thank you.
Or any comments on this? Actually, I have a question. Okay, so based on what about your own experience of using AI? Do you use AI to revise your paper?
Yes, I did, and I think most of the people in this room might have that experience. But I mainly focus on the language aspect, but not the content. Okay, and that's my experience. And the students sometimes might have difficulty providing or developing the content, so they might rely on ChatGPT to revise their content, or for another purpose, for like brainstorming. So my students actually use a lot of AI to help them to bring some ideas and to organize their content before they actually write. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. Okay, any other questions? No. No. Okay, actually, I still have another question.
Yeah.
Okay, so why do you choose this content focus?
So like I said, a good writing does not require good language, but also good content. So the previous study, I think, had a very explicit focus on the linguistic aspects. But and previous research shows that students also had difficulty generating good content in their essay. And they need support in this dimension. And with Gen AI, I think students might rely on Gen AI to provide content-focused feedback. So that's the reason why we do want to see how students engage with this type of feedback, in addition to the linguistic-focused feedback.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lu. Okay, thank you. Okay, then then next we have invited presentation, and because it's conducted in Mandarin, so I will switch to Mandarin. OK， 接下来我们非常荣幸的邀请到来自湖北省的教学名师唐静老师，为我们带来智能时代语文课程改革的新范式。OK，let's welcome.
Ah, 不好意思啊，数字人季静老师提前登场了，非常高兴参加这次峰会，也非常开心在这里和大家一起分享我们在语文学科教学当中运用人工智能赋能我们的课堂教学的改革。那今天呢，我带来了我的数字人季静老师，刚才主持人也介绍了，我是来自湖北省武汉市硚口区的一名语文教研员。那2025世界数字教育大会就是在我们武汉召开的，我相信大家也一定有所了解。那接下来呢，也请我们的数字人季静老师为大家做一个介绍吧。季静老师您好，请你为大家介绍一下2025世界数字教育大会在武汉召开的情况。
盛大节目，一场由教育部或联合国教科文组织全国委员会和湖北省人民政府举办的盛会，以教育发展与变革、智能时代为主题，聚焦教育全阶段发展。大会一一展示了未来课堂、未来教师的智能教学场景，还重磅发布了中国智慧教育来自出台5项数字化成果。
好，谢谢静静老师的分享。那么呢，我是来自硚口区，所以呢，在这次数字大会上，我们硚口区还有我所在的工作室也有一些亮眼的表现，也请我们的静静老师为大家做一个简要的介绍。静静老师，请你为大家简要介绍一下世界数字教育大会上我们硚口区的一些精彩的表现吧。
也在大会很多人讨论很多。当前，硚口区积极响应人工智能发展战略，以全市智慧教育示范区建设为抓手，扎实推进智慧教育各大行动，通过智慧教育环境构建未来课堂新样态。师生共育解锁数字素养新高度，课堂教学革命催生教育生态新范式，加快推进教育数字化转型，人工智能与教育深度融合，构建以人为本的创新教育提升好。
好的，谢谢静静老师的分享，咱们是不是应该也给他一点掌声呢？谢谢大家。好，那接下来真人唐静老师就要登场了。那今天我和大家分享的话题是三师课堂智能时代语文课堂改革的新范式。我想，人工智能就像一把神奇的钥匙，打开了教育的新大门。在我们日常的课堂上，刚才这样的数字人也会经常在课堂成为我们教师的助教，成为孩子们的学伴，陪伴孩子们快乐的成长。那么，人工智能的浪潮汹涌而来，我们更需要去思考，作为教师，我们应该做些什么？在智能时代的课堂上，教师的内涵和价值和过去又有什么相同和不同的地方？那我们在这样的课堂上应该教什么呢？学生又会怎样去学习呢？所以，三师课堂就是基于这样的时代背景，尝试去探索在我们的课堂教学当中进行的变革。首先呢，我想为大家介绍一下三师课堂提出的时代背景。中国政府高度重视人工智能对教育发展的深刻影响。从2017年至今，国家助推 AI 赋能教育加速全面普及，在政策层面和方案设计方面有一系列的举措。那么，尤其是2025年的世界数字教育大会上，中国政府发布了《中国智慧教育白皮书》，这是首次以智慧教育为主题的白皮书。在这一份报告当中，提出了3C 的发展理念，同时呢，也提出了3I 的战略方向，最后展望了未来的3N 的教学路径。所以呢，为全球的智慧教育发展贡献了中国方案，提供了中国智慧。那么，除了政策的推动，还有理论的发展。其实，中国的很多的学者和专家们在 AI 赋能课堂上都有很多深入的理论与实践的探索。刚才我们在前面的2位分享的伙伴当中，听到他们关于学术研究方面对于 AI 赋能课堂的一些思考。其实我们更关注的是，在日常的每一堂课上，我们怎么让 AI 真正助力我们的学生的学，助力老师的教。所以呢，在世界数字教育大会上，周宏宇教授也专门推荐了武汉的三师课堂。那么他所主张的三师课堂是立足于生活实践的教育理念，希望建设教师、小先生和 AI 智能师的师生共同课堂，通过技术赋能重构教学生态，三者共同构建多维互动的学习共同体。那么，我们工作室的老师们在周宏宇教授的理念下，我们基于语文课程核心素养的目标要求， 我们也提出了新生活语文视域下的三师课堂。那我们理解的三师课堂是什么呢？就是一定要立足于儿童的真实的生活，基于儿童生活中的实践，以学生为主体，以教师为主导，以 AI 智能师为支撑，通过主体协同、技术赋能、单元实施、任务进阶来构筑多维互动的学习共同体，促进从知识的学习到智慧升级的课堂转型，从而走向三师协同、共生共长的语文教学新范式。那么这些图片呢，就是我们工作室的老师们在近3个月的时间当中，我们走进了65所学校，服务了3000多位老师，我们开展了系列的教学研讨活动。课堂上我们可以还原再现圆明园的盛景，也可以和 AI 对话，还可以选择和孔子对话。所以呢，和先贤对话，我们会有更多的思考。好，那接下来呢，我会从3个方面和大家具体的分享我对三师课堂在语文课堂教学实践当中的一些理论和实践层面的探索。首先呢，我想三师课堂聚焦三师，三师指哪3师？它各有怎样在当下教育的意义和作用呢？所以我想三师很简单，这样一幅图示大家一定一目了然。小老师一定是学习的主人，老师是教学的主体，那 AI 智能师它是语文教学类主体，因为它并不具有人类的意识。在这样一种结构范式下，我们去审视师的内涵是什么。其实我有时候觉得，我们更应该从中国的传统文化当中去汲取更多的教育的智慧。在唐代的教育家韩愈《师说》当中，他提到，师者，传道授业解惑也。无论时代怎么变革，教师始终是课堂教学、学生生活实践的引领者。他肩负着知识的传递、智慧的启迪，还有价值的引领等多重任务。那么学生呢？我们说，学生也应该是我们的老师。在春秋时期的教育家孔子的《论语》当中，他也提到“三人行，必有我师焉”。今天我们参加这样的盛会，其实在场的每一位伙伴们也是我的老师，我也是要向大家学习。那么在我们学习共同体的课堂样态当中，学生彼此之间，他们在参与语文课堂的实践活动当中，学生要自我建构知识，同时呢，同伴要互教互学。最后呢，他走上讲台当小老师，和大家分享他的学习收获。所以呢，同伴共进。那在这样的课堂上，学生他也应该成为我们的小老师。那第3位老师是谁呢？就是我们的 AI 智能师。其实在中国先秦时期，荀子关于劝学的这部著作当中，他提到了这样一句话：君子生非异也，善假于物也。什么意思呢？其实就是说，一个智者他并不是天生与众不同，他最大的特点就是他善于借助工具。那在当今的人工智能时代，这里的物就应该是 AI 工具。所以呢，善教的老师 AI 智能师，他也在课堂发挥协作育人的作用。那么课前人机合作育协，课中人机交互深度合作，课后呢人机合作去创造。所以 AI 智能师它也发挥了协作认同、协作建构和协作诊断的功能。那么待会儿我们会呈现我们在日常教学当中的一节非常精彩的课例，来为大家具体的阐释 AI 智能师如何在课堂教学中发挥协作的功能，学生如何通过课堂实践提升语文素养，老师如何发挥引领的作用，从而实现三师协作育文课堂的新情境。好，我想和大家分享的第2个观点呢，就是三师课堂也是3段学程全为贯通的课堂。今天我们在探索人工智能在理论层面、在实践层面我们的一些思考，其实我们更关注的是学生是否在这个过程当中，他经历了一段完整的学习历程。 这样一个完整的学习历程，包括课前一个学段，课中一个学段，课后一个学段。而这个完整的学习历程，我们关注的是每一个学生他都要经历这样一种学习历程。好，所以我们来看一看，我们为什么这么关注3段学程呢？我想和大家分享一下，2021年联合国教科文组织在第41届主席大会上发布了这样一份报告，一起重新构想我们的未来。这份报告当中特别提到，数字技术为代表的颠覆性技术会给教育带来重大的变革，而我们的教育要回应如何学、怎么学、学什么、在哪里学、何时学的迫切需求。所以，基于对学以为中心的这样一个深度的思考，我们工作室呢也提出了我们的3师课堂的模型，那就是以小老师的智能新生活为源。为什么呢？因为现在孩子们他是智能时代的原住民，他和过去的儿童已经有了很大的不同。那么在这样一个学习的起点状态之下，我们以教师的5名教学环为关键路径，融入 AI 智能师的5化助学环，推进学生的5步实践环，从而实现未来所需要培养的孩子们需要具备的关键能力，就是生活力、学习力、自主力、合作力、创造力，还有实践力。那么具体而言，教师5名教学环包括哪些内容呢？我们知道，核心素养时代的课程教学改革，我们要关注的是现实真实情境中复杂问题的解决能力，这才是具备未来时代生活孩子们需要具备的关键能力。所以呢，我们构建了精选主题名情境，就是关注学生生活中需要解决的问题，来构建学习主题，创设真实一个学习情境，引导孩子们学习。那么同时在过程当中细解目标、明内容，多元评价、明任务，优化活动，明确方法，遴选资源，明作业。好，今天时间有限，这一环我就不做具体的介绍。那么这个5个环节呢，它是关注了老师在教的方面的引领作用。那么第2个就是小老师的5步实践环。那么小老师，我们的小孩子们在课堂上学习的时候，我们怎么样去激发他积极主动的参与到学习的全过程当中呢？我们需要创设有挑战性的任务啊。所以佐藤学教授曾经说过，他说学习就是一次次的冲刺和挑战最高峰。我非常认同他的观点。所以在我们的任务型的课堂当中，开课的时候呢，就通过任务驱动，启发孩子们去明确我为什么要学这一课。在课堂的进阶过程当中，孩子就知道了我该怎么样去学习，我要掌握哪些学习的方法，训练呢自己习得哪些学习的技能。在学习的结束阶段，孩子们要完成任务的展示，来深度的呈现他在用中学的理念当中所表现出他学有所获的知识、能力和技能。好，学完了以后，通过学习评价对任务进行复盘，进行学而思的阶段，最后到了课后的真实生活当中，任务还要继续迁移，学习还在生活当中继续去发挥它的创造作用。好了，接下来就进入到了我们课堂上最特别的环节 ，AI 智能师的5化助学环。那这个助学环同样要关注课前、课中、课后，也就是说 ，AI 智能师的作用，它不仅仅是在某一个层面上我们有所体现，或者在某一个环节当中我们有所运用，而是要贯穿在我们一堂课的整个的学习历程当中。好，那么这样3者融会贯通，合作共进，才能形成一套完整的课堂的教学流程。那接下来呢，我就以人民教育出版社语文统编教材5年级下册的第6单元这样一篇习作的教学，和大家做一个具体的分享。这是5年级的孩子们，他们要完成这样一份习作。那么，怎么样让他们去感受到探险的神奇？我们在钢筋水泥土城市中长大的孩子，他们没有这样一种野外探索，还有野外生存探险的经历。那么，怎么样去写好这样一个看起来很困难的习作呢？ 所以呢，通过 AI 智能师，我们会给孩子们一些很大的帮助。那么这是这一堂课整个运用了个性化预学、交互化辅学、多样化展学、精准化评学和生成化拓学，把 AI 贯穿始终，来推进学生持续不断的学习。当然 ，AI 的工具很多，在我们一线老师当中，其实我们用的比较多的呢，就是跟今天早上滕校长提到的豆包，他也很喜欢用啊。好，所以我们来看一看。今天在这样一堂课上，豆包是怎么样帮助孩子们踏上了一段神奇的探险之旅？那在开课之初呢，老师会创设驱动性的任务，就是发布了探险任务，引导孩子们去创编探险故事册。那这个时候，我们的孩子们就具备了一个角色，他就是一位叫探险家，他要成为像丁丁一样的探险家，去探险世界的奥秘。那这个时候呢，豆包成为了什么呢？豆包成为了学生探险能力的评估官，他要评估孩子们在探险方面的能力状况，这样他才能够去参与这样一次真实的探险之旅啊。这一定是未来孩子可能遇到的这样的真实，因为我们知道探险的路途是危机四伏，随时可能有去无回。好了，那么课前老师做了一件事，老师要训练 AI。和豆包对话，经过1轮、2轮、3轮的多次对话，那么生成了这样一份探险情境的测试题。这样的测试题呢，有6个组别的题目，孩子们通过课前的预学完成选择题，答案发送给豆包，豆包再进行数据分析，给每一个孩子评出了他的探险能力指数。所以呢，对孩子们探险的知识储备和思维特征会有一个前置性学习的精准的把握。那么把握的主要方面是知识掌握的程度，是否具有探险的知识；第二，风险应对的能力；第三，遇到险情的时候应急反应的决策风格。你是犹豫型的，你还是果断型的，你还是理性思辨的。所以呢，孩子们在这样一个过程当中，我们看到每一个孩子他的思维、他的知识储备，还有他的思维特质，都表现出来一种个性化的特点。那我们的习作教学就应该尊重孩子们个性的发展的特点，来进行个性化的表达。好，在这样一个过程当中，老师呢发挥什么作用呢？我们的老师要引领、要指导，所以呢，他走进小组，对每一个孩子的自我测评的情况进行了具体化的、个性化的指导。那么孩子们也就能够形成对自我的探险能力的原认知，他会对自己有一个非常清楚的评价。好啦，那我们这一堂课很有趣，因为我们去探险，我们绝对不能够孤军奋战，不能独自前往，那样危险系数太高了。所以我们要选队友。那么选择什么样的队友，组建一个单人探险小队呢？所以呢，我们的队友划分为专业智囊团和个性伙伴组。好了，这样的6个人物，他被老师在课前也要进行相应的训练。所以呢，课前老师会对他进行一个智能体的训练。我们后面也可以看到智能体和学生在课堂上互动对话的过程。那么同时呢，智能体老师还要和豆包进行多轮对话，要为孩子们推送探险的资源包。我们知道，在学生对探险能力进行自我评估的过程当中，我们发现很多孩子他不具备这样一种探险的知识，可以说对探险可能会遇到的危险，他了解的特别的少。那么这样，当他在创编探险故事的时候，这可能就是他在写作过程中要遇到的最大的难关。那我们老师的目的，我们就是帮助孩子们跨越这个难题，对不对？跨过这个难关。所以课堂上呢，老师在课前通过和 AI 的多次对话呢，就搜集了很多的这样的探险资料包。在课堂上通过全班的学习平板，每个孩子会有一个平板，然后推送探小老师 AI 智能师，他会随时来推送这样的探险资料包，以解决孩子们在探险过程当中知识经验匮乏的问题，也为后续他在创编探险故事过程当中实现想象合理化奠定了更好的基础。好，那么在 AI 个性化的这个 AI 预学阶段，我们通过锚定生活的起点，联系孩子们生活的经验，帮助他们去探究这样一个学习主题。那么 AI 智能师在这时候，它就是孩子们学习的助跑器。那么在上课的教学的活动继续推进， 有了这样丰富的知识的储备以后，孩子们就要去创编探险的情节，我们是要创编探险故事，对吧？所以呢，学生在教学的过程当中，在学习的过程当中，他也会与豆包进行实时的对话，他要了解去热带雨林会遇到什么危险，去冰川这个探险又会遇到什么危险啊？所以呢，老师在这个过程当中，我们的老师也要发挥支撑的作用，所以我们在课堂上会搭建这样一个思维导图，帮助孩子们构建清晰的思维逻辑，以场景来决定探险遇险过程当中解决问题的办法，形成了一条科学的逻辑链。好啦，那在这个过程当中，我们刚才介绍了有6个智能体，这一堂课要用到6个智能体和1个素质人。那这6个智能体，课前老师把它进行了角色的设定，豆包里面有智能体的设定啊，这是我们的比较多。所以这6个智能体呢，也就是既是智囊团，也是孩子们的学习伙伴。那么在课堂上，他们发挥的作用可是非常的大。当孩子们在写作当中遇到了无法解决的危机，不知道该怎么办的时候，遇到了知识储备感到非常困难，或者解救脱险的思维形成了固化的思维，没有更好的脱离危险的办法，这个时候该怎么办呢？来看看我们孩子们和智能师的对话，听听他和向导的对话吧。好，这是向导和孩子们的对话。当然，这样的对话呢，还可以有多个层次啊，因为毕竟在遇到危险的时候，如果没有雪橇，又没有雪橇犬，那怎么办呢？所以呢，孩子可能还会继续追问。好，这是我们孩子们在课堂上呈现的这样的和这个探险爱好者和这个生物学家一起去对话的过程。好，今天时间有限，我就不再一一呈现。所以呢，交互化辅学的过程当中呢，我们可以看到 AI 它能够提供动态交互式的对话支撑，启发孩子们思考，破解实践的难点。它会成为孩子们在实践创造过程中的攀岩绳。那么接下来呢，思路理清了啊，孩子们呢就进入到了书写探险经历的学习过程当中。那么学习结束以后呢，我们的习作写得怎么样呢？孩子们的表达又达到了一个怎样的水平呢？我们通过我们的探险故事的评价表来对孩子们进行一个精准的评价。注意，我们的评价不仅关注到了孩子的自评、同伴的互评、老师的评价，可能这些评价我们常规教学当中都会做到，但是在人工智能的课堂上，我们应该让 AI 老师也来评价一下。好，所以呢，我们的 AI 老师也会对孩子们进行评价。你看，我们怎么让 AI 老师评价呢？我们的 AI 老师会画画。所以呢，借助豆包的纹身图的功能，我们把孩子的文字拍给豆包，或者是说语音输入给豆包，然后豆包即刻生成文字。通过图文对照，我们就可以看到，把文字想象变成可视的画面。孩子们在对比的过程中就发现，我写的内容不够详细，不够清楚，不具有丰富的想象力，怎么办呢？对照图画，你有哪些内容，还可以再去用你的语言去描述它。所以呢，孩子们的第2次写作以后，他基于对图和文的对照，激发了他的想象力，为他的描写注入了独特的个性化的表达。所以呢，多样化的展学突破了限制，为孩子们的发展呢提供了一个对话的平台，激发了孩子的创意，它成为了孩子不断去激活创意展示的舞台。好，那么学生的习作写完了，我们借助学校的这样一个智能评价平台啊，这也是我工作室的一位伙伴，我的工作室的成员，我们华师附小的廖荣老师，他们学校就有一个平台啊，学校这样一个平台的特别的棒，每一个孩子的习作可以通过 AI 系统一键采集，然后放置在平台上，平台上可以对每个孩子完成作品的提交时间、提交的要求，还有这一个提交的内容作为具体的要求。那么同时即刻生成每个孩子个性化作业的评价。那么同时通过大数据分析每一个孩子的个性化的评价，会对班级的作文当中每个孩子的亮点和问题做一个系统性的评价。那么老师也会根据他对孩子们习作作品的查阅来给出综合性的终极评价。所以班级作文的报告就这样智能的生成。在这个过程当中呢，我们利用作文评改系统的大数据，可以实现差异化的学习。我们可以看到不同的孩子在这样一个学习的过程当中有不同的表现，当然也会有一些共性的问题。 那么这些共性的问题，我们在我们的第2节课上，就是我们的习作讲评课上，我们还会进行这样的集中的指导。那么个性化的学习怎么办呢？我们可以通过补充个性化的资源、个性化的辅导，还有个性化的评改，来通过学生的再一次的自我认知的自我修正，实现个性化的学习。所以我们有这样一个习作修改的教学的流程。那么这就是孩子们所完成的这样一个作业的过程当中的修改的过程。你看，虽然 AI 给了建议， AI 也进行了修改的示范，但是我们的孩子很有个性，他们都有自己的思考，他们也在去用批判的眼光去看待 AI 给他的建议。他觉得什么样的文字才能最真实的表达自己最真切的情感呢？那样的文字才是最属于他的个性化的文采。好，所以在这样的精准化的评学的过程当中，我们可以看到，通过 AI 的数据采集分析，我们可以清楚的洞悉孩子们思维实践的路径，最终形成个性化的诊断报告。在这样一个过程当中， AI 智能师就会成为我们孩子们前行道路上的导航仪。当然，精彩还在继续，孩子们的创造力还在不断的得到激发和挑战。为什么呢？课堂结束的时候，我们的素质人探探出来了，他告诉我们的朋友们、小孩子们说 ，AI 绘图、AI 作曲，还有 AI 视频，我们还可以成为探险故事的创意表达者。所以呢，你看多模态、跨媒介的创意拓展，再一次激发了孩子们的挑战潜能。我们来听一下课末的时候，老师和学生与 AI 的共同对话。好，学生们都有自己个性化的感受。那我们看一看，老师把语音输入给豆包以后 ，AI 以后，它即刻就生成了歌曲。那歌曲我们也听一听，节奏特别欢快的男声版，神秘的，积极去探索，需要勇气，需要智慧。看孩子们内心涌动的这种个性化的表达融入到歌曲当中，多么鼓舞人心！当然，也可以有不一样的表达，也有不一样的感受。看，抒情版的探索智慧之光，共同面对，共同成长。我们需要勇敢，需要团结，这样我们才能在奔向梦想的道路上成为自己人生的主。挑战、友谊，看这么多的关键词，其实都是孩子在这一次写作过程当中的最宝贵的人生的财富。好，所以像这样的作品呢，其实还有很多，比方说 AI 技术可以把孩子们的文字变成图画，变成有创意的绘本，还可以变成这样的微电影、小创作。孩子们还可以给他配上旁白，配上字幕，就自己也会变成一位电影创作大师。好了，那么我想这样的作品，它就不仅仅是一次作文，它也不是一次作业，它就是孩子们展现自己创造力的最美的优秀的作品。那在这个过程当中，我们的 AI 智能师呢，它就成为了激发孩子们持续探究的动力、拓展实践场域的能量包。好，那么这样的 AI 工具还有很多，我觉得最重要的是怎么样把一些小工具有效的运用起来，真正的帮助我们孩子们激发对课堂的学习的兴趣，激发他们的实践能力，促进他们的创造能力。好，那么三师就形成了三环一体，协同共进，让教师、学生和 AI 智能师 共生共场。那么最后简要说一下我的第3个观点，就是三师课堂其实是三智融合、协同共创的课堂。为什么这么理解呢？我想英国的教育家怀特海曾经告诉我们，教育的全部目的就是使人具有活跃的智慧。所以三师课堂的本质就是三智的共同提升，教师的教育智慧，小老师的实践智慧， AI 智能师的协作智慧，都让我们感受到三师融合、三师协同、三师共舞，成为我们语文课堂教学改革当中的新范式。好，最后让我们展望未来，期待和大家一起努力，因为技术赋能教育的终极目标是让每一个孩子都能在数字时代找到生命的支点。好，我的分享就到这里，谢谢大家，感谢大家的倾听，也请大家可以关注我们的工作室微信公众号，期待以后有大家更多分享和交流的机会。再次感谢大家，谢谢。
非常感谢非常感谢唐老师的这个非常激情澎湃的分享啊，意犹未尽。OK， 大家请问有没有问题？有没有想跟唐老师进一步交流的？OK， 没有的话，那我问吧，让我占这个位置。OK， 唐老师，那我其实我没有教过小学啊，所以我比较好奇，那如果我们在课堂上，请问你们是这个一节课大概是多长时间
40分钟。
？40分钟，40分钟的话，会在40分钟都在进行这个课程吗？还这个活动，还是说会？
其实，也就是说 AI 智能师在课堂上使用的时间是吧？我觉得他在课堂上可能只能占到20%的时间，60%的时间呢应该是给孩子，然后还有20%的时间是我们的老师，对吧？课堂肯定是孩子的舞台，孩子才是课堂的主人。其实，在很多的时候，老师呢是一个引领、示范、指导、帮助的作用。其实 AI 师呢，它也更多的是一个引导、启发、示范的作用。其实今天呢，因为时间有限，本来我可以看大家看另外一个课例的，那个课例很有意思。可能在那个课例上呢，老师的作用可能只占到了10%，学生占到了80%。学生和 AI 是一半一半。为什么呢？就是它是口语交际课，那学生在课堂上呢，怎么样去辩论？就是 AI 智能师，他要教孩子怎么辩论，对吧？正方、反方，我们怎么样亮观点、找论据，然后倾听别人这个发言当中的一些观点，还有漏洞，因为你要反驳他，对吧？好，辩论嘛，辩驳。所以呢，那这个时候呢，AI 智能师他会那堂课我们有3个智能题，我们做了3个智能题。为什么要做3个呢？可能老师你会觉得很奇怪。一个智能题呢，就是他要做一个裁判员。我们知道，真正的辩论赛上是有一个裁判的，对不对？然后呢，还有正方的辩手，还有反方的辩手。所以通过 AI 智能体的2位辩手的这个辩论，我们孩子们可以通过现场的辩论生成的对话所生成的文字，可以摘录关键词句，然后就发现，AI 智能师在辩论的整个过程当中，他怎么样提出观点，他怎么样寻找论据，他怎么样发现漏洞，来对别人进行即时性的反驳，从而让自己的观点更加明确。所以其实在这个过程当中，学生习得的不仅是一种语言，不仅是一种辩论的方法，还有更多的是孩子们思维能力的提升。因为杜威曾经说过，教育的本质就是思维能力的发展，所以我觉得这个也是特别的重要。其实我们运用 AI 智能师在整个课堂当中，我想就像是英国教育学者吧，洛丁斯他曾经说过一句话，他说我们课堂我们的教学的本质是什么？本质不是让孩子完成任务，其实我每堂课都会让孩子完成很多任务，对不对？但是我们教学的本质不是这个，我们教学的本质是要改变认知结构。我觉得 AI 智能师可以给我们一些帮助， AI 智能师之间的对话也会给我们很多的启示。好，谢谢大家。
谢谢。请问大家还有问题吗？我只是抛砖引玉。
好的，谢谢。
唐老师你好，然后很高兴听到你今天的分享，然后因为我是明天的分享者，然后在听的时候就很有共鸣，就跟我明天要讲的东西有点很多相似的地方。然后我在听您在讲的时候，有一个比较大好奇，因为其实您可能做过非常多的实践，然后也去过很多学校，你觉得在推广这个3师这个模式，或者说在跟很多一线的 语文老师在交流沟通过程中，你觉得老师们对这个模式来说，他们在接受的时候可能遇到的挑战或困难是什么？
我觉得老师第一个方面吧，可能是他的教育理念上的更新，这个是最重要的，因为我们习惯了一种传统的教学的理解，就是老师教学生学，但是现在呢，突然多了一个 AI 智能师来了。那么我们怎么样和他在这样一个课堂的时空当中去和谐共处？然后去发现 AI 智能师所具有的我们所不具有的能力，来帮助孩子们更好的去学习，成为一个更好的自己。所以这是在理念层面上，我觉得首先要改变老师的观念。因为我是观念变得很快的，因为在我就是今年 DeepSeek 一出来的时候，我就自己尝试运用了一下，我就特别的震惊，因为其实我们以前在慕课时代，是吧？慕课。可汗学院的慕课其实也风靡全世界，大家都做了很多，包括那个特殊的疫情的时期吧，我们有几个月的线上学习，其实翻转课堂也做了很多。但是呢，技术领域的革新改变了所有的领域却没有撼动教育的领地。所以这个怎么样去在教育的领地上，通过 AI 智能的作用来推动教师教学行为的改变，所以很多老师还不太适应，可能在理念上的更新要有所改变。我觉得这是第一个问题我们一定要去相信我们可以驾驭它要有这个自信。好，第二个方面呢，我觉得就是因为我们老师们这个对于 AI， 因为现在 AI 工具很多，比方说有豆包、DeepSeek， 刚才前面有几位老师也分享了 ChatGPT 是吧？还有可汗学院他们研究的这个工具是可汗 Migo， 我看了那一个可汗老师的新书嘛，教育新语。所以我在想，别人都有这样的好工具，我们能不能也有自己的好工具我们可以去发现一些小工具，比方豆包是吧？DeepSeek 呀，包括文心一言或者是质朴轻言，还有腾讯元宝。今天早上我还跟我个老师在沟通，他的腾讯元宝他怎么用的。所以我觉得大家在用的过程当中就发现，有的工具可以擅长文字表达文字写作，有的工具可以擅长深度对话。当然，这是对工具的了解。第三个，我觉得就是老师要有自己的教学智慧，也要有自己的教学理解，不然的话，你就被工具给带走了，你就完全依赖工具了。其实我们在上课的时候，就是课前你要想实现这样的智能课堂，就是你对工具的了解要非常的清楚，同时你要很清楚你要教什么，学生要学什么，你希望你的课堂让孩子真正收获什么，这个是非常非常重要。这样你才能去设计你的智能体或者你的数字人，你才会去设计，你给我来一次苏格拉底的对话，是吧？启发孩子们在思维的深度上有一个进阶。好，那如果你训练了智能体，智能体在你的训练当中经过和你的多轮对话，它就具备了这样一种进阶性的挑战性的思维。那课堂上，当你要和孩子进行互动，孩子也要和智能体进行互动的时候，那么他和智能体的对话就有了思维的增量。所以我觉得这是在老师对自我教学本质的认知上，他要有一定的高度。好，谢谢。当然培训也很重要，我觉得我今天来就在学习的，所以我觉得在这次学习当中我收获了很多。我也想把老师们的丰富的宝贵的经验带回到我们的湖北武汉，带回到我们的课堂，让我们孩子们学得更开心。好，谢谢大家。
唐老师您好，感谢您的分享。我有一个很感兴趣的问题，就是您提到在使用之前，老师会对这个，比如说豆包做一些调试。那我想知道，老师做这个工作是自己去探索，还是说学校有专门的培训，就针对老师如何去跟 AI 进行这个数据的一个输入？
好，谢谢你的提问。你问到了一个非常关键的问题，就是三师课堂。所以呢 ，AI 智能师的我们对它的了解，还有我们对它的运用，是吧？它在使用的过程当中会给我们些什么样的反馈？这都是我们需要关注的。我觉得确实是两步走。第一个呢，就是培训。在整个的我们的现在的基层的层面上，其实刚才我们看到那个数字人分享了我们桥口教育，不是也做了很多这种培训嘛？所以呢，有这个教研部门的一些培训。 当然也有我们工作室自己组织的一些培训，比方说上个星期五，我们工作室的就刚刚组织了一次面向我们全区的老师的这样一个智能时代教学创新的应用，就是有9位老师，我工作室9位老师依次登场，每个人就像我这样讲10分钟，讲一讲他们在一堂课当中运用了什么工具，是怎么用的啊？他为什么用这个工具？他是怎么设计这个工具的？他是怎么训练这个工具的 AI 的？所以呢，他会有这样一个培训。那么第二个层面呢，就是因为很多老师他的观念已经转变了，他就会觉得在现在的课堂上，如果还是因循守旧，用传统的、用过去的方式去教现在智能时代的孩子，那就是对孩子未来的不负责任。所以呢，很多负责任的、有创意的、有想法的老师，他自己愿意在课堂上去尝试、去摸索。所以呢，其实我是觉得，其实我们老师也会，我会推荐老师们读很多书，老师们也会看很多书。但是我个人感觉啊，在这样的课堂上，并不是你看了很多关于人工智能的书籍，研究了很多人工智能的这样一些课堂运用的文献，你就很会上这样的课，就是帮助孩子们在课堂这样去学习。你一定要去用这些小工具，你在生活当中要用，对吧？你拍了一个照，把它变成了图画，让它动起来。然后发一发你的朋友圈，就是你的智能素养是提高了。那么在生活中用起来了以后，你在课堂上你就会想办法把它的功能最大化，让孩子们用起来。当然前期呢，怎么样去训练智能体，这也会有相应的一些小课程。我们工作室也正在做这方面的研究，后面也会推到我们的公众号上啊。好，谢谢。
我还有一个小问
嗯
题，就是那你在上课的时候，学生是人手一台 iPad，还是说老师把学生比如说这些信息收集起来，然后再用智能体的形式展示出来？
是这样，就是刚才我说到了，它贯穿整个的学习的全过程，可能在课前老师会有推送这样一个学习的资源，是吧？当然，这个学习的资源一般来说，我们就是在学校的环境、教学环境当中，就是在老师的指导下进行一些前置性的学习。好，然后呢，在课堂上，学生对这些工具的运用，它也是不需要每个孩子都有一个平板。也不需要每个孩子都有这个电子产品来辅助他学习。就像刚才我讲到的这样一个口语交际课，其实我们现在很多课堂就老师拿个手机，就是刚才那堂课，因为今天这个时间有限，我没有放那个上课的视频。就是这堂课，当时我们工作室有2个老师都获得了我们武汉市的优质课竞赛1等奖的，都是上课用了这个智能体。然后呢，它这个智能体就是老师拿着手机，就像刚才我跟数字人对话一样的，我用这个手机遥控它，我把那个对话按键一开，然后我就跟他说，然后我的手机再拿给我的孩子，拿给我们的学生去说，然后它的这个语言系统就自动输入到了豆包里面，豆包就即刻就可以生成图片，或者是它的一些新的思考来启发孩子们。就是并不是说我们完全要依赖这一个设备，我知道你说的是设备，就是说有时候我们课堂上需要每个孩子都有平板，或者教室有这样一种这个信息技术装备比较充足这样一种学习环境，可能才能用豆包或者 AI， 其实不是这样的。我觉得当老师你很善于运用，或者你很巧妙的运用它的某一个功能的时候，这样的智慧在我们的课堂就会随时随地的发生。
谢谢唐老师，谢谢您的分享。
好的，谢谢你的提问。
谢谢唐老师。
好，谢谢，谢谢。
好的，非常感谢唐老师，请坐。好的，那我们接下来会有大概在外面我们会有这个 coffee and tea break，OK？bon appetit，祝大家好胃口。请大家记得这个，我们4点的时候还有今天的最后一场这个屋子里的分享，OK？So see you later.